What's up, CBS Sports Network? I am here with an extremely legendary guest, the voice of New England, Mr. Bob Socci. Bob, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me. I love the intro to your podcast, and it's such an honor to be here with you today.
Definitely. Shout out to my producer for that one. So getting right into it, there's rumors coming out of the Patriots training camp that Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi are in an open competition for the QB1 role. Do you believe that to be the case?
Chris, so far I don't think there's evidence that it's a real competition. I think Mac is the starter based on the number of reps he's getting, the players that he's generally getting repetitions with. Now on Thursday, Bill Belichick changed things up a bit because Mac has been working with guys that we would consider the regulars, or you could even say starters at wide receiver, and at least the top line players who are available on the offensive line, which is really banged up right now. Mac's been working with those guys predominantly, getting the bulk of the snaps with them. On Thursday, Belichick did mix up the receiving unit with him. Bailey Zappi threw to some of the regulars in his first series of team drills, meaning 11 on 11. Mac threw to some of the younger guys, but still played pretty well. And I think that, Mac is at a point where he's very confident again. He's very comfortable with the arrival of Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator. And I think it's almost a pickup where they left off 2 years ago with Josh McDaniels. Not the same system, not exactly the same offense, different coach, of course. But I think Mac is now ready to try to take a step forward and upward, from that point at which he ended his rookie season in 2021, because last year really was a step back for him.
One of those guys in their offense, in my opinion, wide receiver number one, is Kendrick Bourne. I've heard rumblings on Twitter that he's supposedly looking like Julio Jones in practice.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What have you seen from Kendrick Bourne?
Well, I'm not sure Julio Jones is the best description, but I'll tell you what, he looks a lot like Kendrick Bourne did 2 years ago, and the Patriots would take that. And someone who was energetic and made a lot of big plays for them in 2021, including a 75-yard catch and run against Dallas, one of Mac Jones' better performances of the year. Kendrick, by his own admission, had a difficult time last year. It was a very unorthodox season for the Patriots offense in a lot of ways, with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge taking over the play calling and quarterback coaching duties. And Kendrick, right from the start, did not seem to endear himself for whatever reason with that offensive staff. I think he's been energetic and enthusiastic. It seems like he's in a really good place with Bill Belichick. There's some joking that was taking place between them on the practice field a couple of days ago, and Bourne talked about it, and Bill's been very complimentary of him. And based on what we're seeing, I think he's going to be a real nice compliment offensively. And some people get fixated on the number one versus number two, number three receiver. I'm not sure the Patriots truly have a number one, but I think they have a collection of receivers if they can keep these guys healthy and on the field, because Devontae Parker's had injury problems. We know Juju Smith-Schuster is coming off a knee issue in the playoffs last year and had to rehab it in the spring, and he's had some problems with injuries in recent seasons. But I think if that group stays together, it's a trio of 1As, number twos, if you will, that I think as a group can give them the kind of production they need to be a very competitive offense, because I think the two tight ends, with Hunter Henry really having a nice camp, and he's already earned Mac Jones' trust, I think those guys are really going to benefit the offense too. So they may not have that truly elite guy. A lot of people wanted them to sign DeAndre Hopkins. I was in that camp. I thought he could help them a lot. But I think it's still a pretty good group, to say the least, if they keep them together.
I agree with you. So kind of looking forward to the 2023 season. It's upon us. It's fast approaching. I look at the Patriots schedule and I say, man, this is by far the toughest schedule out of any NFL team. What are your thoughts on how they will perform?
I agree with you. And I think it's an interesting situation out of the gate, because the Pats generally under Bill Belichick haven't opened with the same urgency with which they closed the season. It was said about Belichick several years ago that he treated September as an extension of the preseason. But I think with this year, given the schedule, the degree of difficulty, where the Patriots are in that AFC East division, it's extra important for them to get off to a good start. Mike Reese, who does a terrific job covering the Patriots for ESPN, believes that the Patriots thus far in training camp may be practicing and working with that in mind. Based on the intensity of the practices the last couple of days that they've had padded practices. They did so on Wednesday and Thursday. They'll go into the stadium on Friday as we record this interview, and that'll be a lighter workout in all likelihood, primarily focusing on special teams. But on Wednesday and Thursday, Chris, a lot of hitting and pads, including tackling to the ground. Last year, they weren't even at this point, this stage of training camp. And even in past years, in recent years, we didn't see guys being tackled all the way to the ground. There was contact, but not real football necessarily, where guys being hit head on and driven into the turf. Hopefully they're going to hit the Philadelphia Eagles harder on September 10th, but it's been hard enough for training camp practices to give us the indication that this team is practicing with a different physicality, a different mentality, it seems, and that sense of urgency to come out of the gate, because they're going to need it when you look at the opening 3 games, just that group. You got Philadelphia and Miami, and then, of course, you play the Jets. And then beyond that, when you're talking about the AFC West and then the NFC East, it's an extremely difficult schedule. Their 2 Western road trips are not back-to-back, so that's going to be taxing when those games come up on the schedule as well for them.
For sure. I think the first 5 games are crucial in terms of how they perform throughout the season. So looking forward to next Thursday, exactly a week from when we're recording this. The Patriots play the Houston Texans at Gillette. How are you preparing for the game?
Well, I'm right now trying to get to know a lot of the players that are new to the Pats, get familiar with what they can do in terms of their skills, but also trying to learn their backgrounds. Some of them have really made strides since the spring, like Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas, the wide receiver out of Liberty. He's a pretty dynamic little athlete, and I think that he's going to be a player that will probably see a lot of action in all 3 preseason games, assuming he's healthy for all 3, and will be an exciting player to watch. So he's certainly a guy that we've gotten to know a bit, especially this past week, as not only Bailey Zappi, but now Matt Jones is starting to turn to him more and more, and he's been making some plays. So it's really a matter of getting more familiar with guys like that, trying to stay on top of the storylines for the Patriots and the rest of the NFL going into that preseason opener. We tend not to talk about the opposition very much during our telecast, the way they're structured, but we'll touch on the Houston Texans a bit, particularly with Bill O'Brien calling the plays for the Patriots as the former Texans head coach. And I just realized doing a little homework, since he was fired in the first part of 2020, started at 0-4 with the Texans in 2020, they're now on to their 4th coach. Romeo Crennel, David Culley, Lovie Smith, and now D'Amico Ryans, which is really flabbergasting, that kind of instability. And, of course, their general manager is a former Patriot personnel executive, Nick Caserio.
Definitely. I think Houston, though, will get it right this season. D'Amico Ryans being a former player, having that experience. So a former player that I have personally heard to be the next head coach of the Patriots is Gerard Mayo. Do you think Gerard will eventually take over for Bill after the season?
Well, my hunch is that Gerard Mayo would be the top candidate for the Patriots at this given time. And who knows how much longer Bill Belichick will continue to coach. I do believe the Patriots are poised to have a competitive season. I don't know if the record will be what fans are accustomed to or really are demanding, given the strength of schedule that we've talked about. And there are some areas where they're thin. The offensive line is right at this time as we talk right now is a very concerning aspect for this team, because they've been practicing without Michael Onwenu coming off ankle surgery. Cole Strange got banged up in practice this week. Trent Brown has not been out there. And then the right tackle spot is really up for grabs, and there are several players, including a couple of journeymen, vying for that spot. So that's a pretty fragile area, and you got to be able to protect the quarterback to give your offense a chance to have success. I mentioned the wide receivers. I think they're certainly more than adequate, but they can't afford to lose anybody. A young player like Tyquan Thornton, for example, has been set back. He hasn't practiced the last couple of days as we record this. So having said that, I think this could be a good team and a very competitive team, a much more enjoyable team to watch and to follow all season than last year when the offense really never found its footing. And Bill Belichick, will have them in competition for a playoff spot by the end of the year, if not in the postseason. And I think he will ultimately break down Shula's record as the head coach of the Patriots, now 18 wins away. Now, if things really go south and sideways, if injuries pile up, if they don't get off to a good start, I never say never in the NFL especially. And who knows what will happen. But I do think Gerard Mayo would be a likely candidate and certainly at the top of the list or very near the top of the list for the Kraft family. He's someone who not only played for the Patriots, but really endeared himself to fans and to ownership and to the coaching staff when he was a player because he was such a phenomenal leader, but also someone who's extremely intelligent and has a great personality, a wonderful sense of humor. I think he learned a lot from Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, as a young player about business. And that set him up for his first opportunity post-football to work for Optum. And he certainly was a high-rising executive, very quickly ascending a corporate ladder in healthcare. And, of course, came back to the Patriots, talked back into coaching, and he's done a great job. The defense has been a strength of this team, certainly a player that really draws rave reviews from the guys he coaches. He's very articulate. He's good with the media. And I think he's someone that, when you look at the modern-day head coach, young, enthusiastic, energetic, someone with charisma, someone that I think can straddle that line between being a player's guy and the kind of tough football coach, and he has that experience playing for Bill Belichick and the assistant coaches he's been under. I mean, the whole package is there. He just doesn't have as much experience as some other guys since he got into coaching a couple of years after retiring as a player.
That experience is crucial, and especially in the healthcare field. So transitioning to your personal journey, when did you know that sportscasting was something that you wanted to pursue full time?
I knew when I was 11 or 12 years old, although my first choice was hopefully to be a catcher or a second baseman for a Major League Baseball team. But I also knew at a very young age that wasn't likely to happen. But when I was in Little League Baseball and playing youth sports in my hometown of Auburn, New York, I used to comment all the time about the games we were playing. And then I would finish the day outside on the playground or at practice or at games, and go into our house and watch sports almost every day, whatever the season was, and to myself or even out loud, I pretend that I was broadcasting those games. So I knew at a very, very young age that it was a dream that I wanted to pursue, and I'm so grateful, so lucky, Chris, that I'm able to live that dream. It's a cliche, living the dream, but I've been so blessed to be able to do that.
So after college, how did you assess what your next opportunity was?
That's a great question, because when I was in college, a lot of my experience was not in radio or television. It was behind the scenes working in sports public relations. It just turned out that when I went to the University of Dayton as a college student, I got a couple of internships working with media, but behind the scenes, including an internship with the Cincinnati Reds baseball team. But I still knew in my heart of hearts that I wanted to be a broadcaster. And so I used that PR experience to parlay an opportunity as a public relations intern into a chance to get on the air for a minor league baseball team in Rochester, New York. I was hired as an intern, an assistant director of communications, to do a lot of public relations work and anything else they asked me to do, which on some days meant help the grounds crew after a rainstorm. On some days it meant help unload a truck of promotional items or food supplies that just came into the stadium for the concession stands. On other days, it meant trying to sell advertising or ticket packages. But I knew I wanted to be a broadcaster, and I was lucky enough my first year in the Rochester organization that one of the two radio announcers left for another station. And so I got a chance at a very early age, a very young age, to work on the air for a AAA baseball team with Josh Lewin, who was the full-time voice, also a youngster. And, that sparked my interest all the more. It really, really fueled that dream for me and gave me an opportunity to get my foot in the door. And then I continued to pursue other opportunities as a full-time broadcaster, really primarily in the minor league baseball path early in my career. And then I became a broadcaster for the U.S. Naval Academy football and basketball teams, started doing freelance work, calling college basketball, moved to Boston eventually in 2008 and started knocking on doors locally. And then, a dream came true in 2013 when I was hired by CBS Radio Boston to work on the Patriots broadcasts after Gil Santos retired.
Freelance work is something that's so common for broadcasters, aspiring sportscasters. It's something that you have to be willing to make that sacrifice. Talk about the sacrifice of being a freelance broadcaster.
Yeah, one of the things for me, and I was telling this to a group of kids today, that was really difficult, and it was really the only part of the journey outside of some things that don't bother you as much when you're young. You don't get into this business to make a lot of money at an early age, generally speaking. So when I was calling baseball games in the Class A Midwest League in Peoria, Illinois, or in the Class A South Atlantic League, working in Salisbury, Maryland, I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was making enough to live, and it really didn't matter. It was all about calling games and doing what I love and getting experience and trying to get the next job. And so I was in a great place, but the challenge for me more than anything else is that I had to move away from home and then go to a lot of places where the jobs existed because there are only so many opportunities. It's a very competitive field. There, at that time, were more minor league baseball teams than there are today. But nonetheless, there were only so many jobs available even at that stage of minor league baseball. So we're talking in the mid-'90s, and I had to go to Peoria, Illinois, and live there for 3 years, and then I'd uproot and go to Maryland, and then I'd eventually take a baseball job in New Mexico and Virginia, and then come to New England. And so it was hard to establish relationships and maintain close friendships sometimes because as soon as you got to know people, it was time to go to the next job. But again, compared to what other people have to do in their daily lives to make a living, it's fun and games. I get a chance to do what I dreamed of doing as a kid. I say that the work that I do, quote unquote work, I'm doing my homework for broadcast. For football, for example, I get to do Monday through Saturday what most people who work 9 to 5 have to do for their fantasy football league team. So it's a hobby for them. In my case, it's a full-time job. And I've been so fortunate to be able to experience everything that I have. And so there are sacrifices, again, leaving family. But as I look back on it, more than worthwhile in my case. And the thing about someone like yourself being close to Boston, for example, as a young broadcaster, you're in a major market and also close to Providence. And so you have two top 50, I believe, markets in America with not only professional sports, an abundance of college teams, a lot of stations, multiple network affiliates in between the two markets for ABC, NBC, Fox, CBS. And so there really are a lot of wonderful opportunities in this area for young people. They can go to college locally. They can intern. I always encourage kids to get as much experience as you can. Never say no when you're young, and say yes to every opportunity you can get to better yourself, to get experience, to get more comfortable and confident on the air. And so someone like yourself, you may be able to spend your entire career here in New England, as opposed to somebody like myself who grew up in a small town in the middle of New York State and had to go from Rochester to Peoria, from Peoria to Salisbury, Maryland, etc.
For sure. I think living in New England presents so many great opportunities. And like you said, being willing to take advantage, whatever they ask you to do, you have to do to get to where you want to eventually get to. So getting a job with the Patriots, it's a lot of responsibility, 6-time Super Bowl champions. what is a game week from Monday through Sunday looking like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because you mentioned that we're a week away from next Thursday's preseason opener. And so right now, as we're talking, I'm just going over some of my notes from training camp, as well as some of the notes that I keep on the team. I'll show you. This is one of my notebooks. And I'm starting to put together what are called spotter charts for next week's game. And if I'm going to excuse myself for just 5 seconds, I'll grab one of those charts and reach down here for it. So when I talk about homework, for example, what I'm trying to do is accumulate a lot of information on the players and the teams and some of the storylines regarding the season, not only for the Patriots, but as well the NFL. For example, we might wind up talking about the new kickoff rule. We might be talking about the stadium renovations at Gillette Stadium during the telecast. So I'm trying to compile a lot of information, not just on football on the field and the players who are going to be in that game or likely to be in that game on Thursday, but I'm going to compile information too for players that may not be on the field or aren't expected to be on the field. I've got to have information on 180 players going into that game on Thursday. And as the week goes along, Chris, I put together what I call spotter charts. In my case, I use a poster board and computer printouts. And I will have, for example, on one side of it, the Patriots offense versus the opposing defense. This happens to be the Buffalo Bills defense. And then as I flip it over, I have the Bills offense against the Patriots defense with a lot of notes and statistics and so forth on the side as well, just in case I need them for reference. And in addition, I go to practice, I watch the players, I start to identify characteristics about them that are going to help me, I hope, call the game and identify them immediately and be really informed, or at least much better informed about them next Thursday than I am today. I also listen to players and ask questions of them during press conferences. Same thing with the coaches. Tomorrow we're going to have Zoom conferences with the assistant coaches. We've had regular opportunities to ask Bill Belichick questions. So that takes place during the week as well during the regular season. And then you watch video of the opposing team. Now, I don't have any video to watch of the Houston Texans in 2023, but maybe I'll go back and watch a game late last season just to get a feel for some of the players that are coming back and just to really get an understanding of kind of the storylines at the end of the year for them. And I'll, during the regular season, maybe watch one or two games of the opposing team, go back over the Patriots' previous game. And as the week goes on, you kind of do it in different stages. And then by the end of the week, Saturday before Sunday NFL game during the regular season, hopefully next Wednesday before the Thursday preseason opener, I've got all my information compiled and ready to go. And then on game day, it's just a matter of, okay, going to the stadium relaxed, maybe getting a highlighter out and refreshing my memory, studying my notes, watching warm-ups closely so that I can identify players without constantly looking down at my chart. Say, oh, yeah, there's number 32. Who's that? Now, I'm going to watch them on the field and then look at my chart and continue to watch them during warm-ups. So hopefully I can more easily and quickly identify who they are. But it's a process that unfolds over the course of the week. And like I said, I love that part of it. There is some legwork. There's a lot of typing. There's a lot of writing. Some people don't do their charts on computers. Some people do them by hand on manila folders. Some people have other people do their charts for them. There are a couple of companies, for example, that offer services producing spotter charts. And everybody has their own way of doing it. I prefer my format just because it's something I've gotten comfortable with. And I also think that by inputting that information, hopefully some of it's going to stick with me. But once the game begins, and it's very important to stress, Chris, the game is always the story. And so the game is going to dictate what you say, when you say it. And you may not necessarily have to use any of that information you've compiled all week long.
And one thing I found really interesting that you said was you're going back to watch a game from last season. The Houston Texans, obviously, they had Dameon Pierce, Nico Collins, Philip Dorsett, all returning for 2023. Their new pieces are Tank Dell, Robert Woods, and Cesar Stroud. So having an offense that has, some players returning, some players coming in, are you more focused on the guys who are coming in rather than the guys who have already been there?
No, I think in the Texans' case, because they were so unfamiliar to me since the last time the Patriots played them, I'll try to focus on everybody. And again, we in our preseason telecast, just the nature of how they're produced, because they're local telecasts, and we don't spend as much time late in preseason games calling the play-by-play. We tend to drift away from the nuts and bolts of play-by-play to have conversations about the position battles. Scott Zolak and I, plus the studio analyst Paul Perillo, we'll get into a conversation about the wide receiver group, the offensive line group, because I think in the back end of preseason games, you get to the third or fourth quarter, you're seeing a lot of players out there that fans aren't so familiar with, and the play-by-play doesn't become as important as maybe this conversation we're having, to give the fans an idea. Okay, who's on the bubble here? Who's got a legitimate shot to make this team? Who are the players who we're going to watch more closely in next week's game? And, I still want to be informed about the Texans. I still want to be informed about every Patriots player. We're not going to ignore those guys. There's just going to be a little bit less of that, which is not something you would do during the regular season, because in the preseason, it's great to call touchdowns and offensive highlights and the great plays that happen. But the wins and the losses, they don't really carry a lot of meaning for those teams on the field. What's most important by the end of a preseason game is, okay, who stood out or who took a step back today? Who do we think had to make a real good impression on the coaching staff to maintain the momentum he's built up in training camp thus far? Or what player, we knew was on the bubble coming in didn't help himself? Hopefully we have more of the other side of that. What player helped himself? So those are all the things that we think about when we go into those preseason telecasts.
Definitely. It's all about that 53. So it's been an honor to be able to talk to you. My final question for you is, long-term success is fueled by advice. I believe that in order to be successful, you need advice, and it's crucial to be able to get to that end result. What is some advice that you've been told throughout your journey, and what is some advice you have for younger people like myself?
You have a wonderful attitude, and I can see and hear your talent. So you have a bright future ahead of you. There's no doubt about that. Certainly, seeking advice is critical, and along with that, constructive criticism. I stress this all the time to young broadcasters, and I need it myself, just like players need to be coached. So I identified broadcasters who had styles, or there were aspects about their character that I really admired and respected. I would ask them to listen to my work. And it's amazing how many people make themselves accessible in our business. People that are really successful too. People who were where I wanted to be and did the job the way I wanted to. Not necessarily copying them, but guys that when I heard their work, it transcended just sports. You could tell they were informed about the games and they called it a great game, but they also had a well-rounded delivery and view of everything. And I think that stands out with the best. You're talking about Bob Costas, Al Michaels, Ian Eagle, Kevin Harlan, people like that. So I would reach out to anybody that I thought, was someone I could benefit from, that I could really identify with. And I would ask for their candid feedback if they'd be willing and able to listen to some of my work or watch some of my television work. And so I think you really have to be open to that. A great piece of advice along those lines, though, that someone told me many years ago, he said, you have to be your own harshest critic, but you also have to be your own biggest booster. You got to really believe in yourself. So it's a fine balancing act, right? If you're asking people to pick your work apart all the time and to kind of coach you and so you can improve, you want to really improve on the craft. That's the number one thing. When you get into the business, you have goals and a future job in mind, but to get there, it's all about the process. It's just like a coach or player talks. I'm speaking in cliches. It's about the work that you do on a day-to-day basis and always looking to improve, whether it's as a talk show host, a podcast host, or a play-by-play broadcaster. And while you're doing that, what you find out is a lot of those people offer real encouragement and they give you a lot of confidence. That certainly was the case for me, including from Gil Santos, my predecessor, and of course the Hall of Fame voice of the Patriots, always the Hall of Fame voice of the Patriots. He's the voice of football here in New England. And he gave me some great advice too, Christian. And what he said was, when I got this job, look, he said, people may not like the way you do it because it's not the way I did it. But just remember, people will like the way you do it because it's not the way I did it. Just be yourself. So you're not going to please everybody, but you got to be yourself. You cannot try to imitate Gil Santos or anyone else that you grew up listening to. You find your voice. And again, you do that through repetition, paying attention to the craft, always seeking improvement, and through advice and constructive criticism from others. And you'll find too that you build good relationships, and those are the relationships that can help you move from level to level within our business.
That is unbelievable advice that you just gave right there. That really stuck with me. People think, coaches watch film, players watch film, but media has to watch film too in order to get better. And broadcasting is like building a pyramid. And you're an example of someone who's at the top of that pyramid. So it's been a really great opportunity to be able to speak with you today. I cannot wait to listen to you next week on Thursday night at 7 o'clock against the Houston Texans.
Oh, this has been great. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'm serious. You have a wonderful future ahead of you. You do a terrific job.
Really appreciate that. I will see you here real soon.
Thanks, Krish.
I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer.